Welcome to Yateley. I'm on Swan Valley Lakes. It's the first time I've stepped foot on this complex, which I'm ashamed to say, and I'm real looking forward to the session. I got here last night, it was absolutely trashing it with rain, so I pretty much just flicked some rods out into open water. Woke up this morning, the forecast has done what it said it will do, and it's bright and sunny. And this, which is peg 1 tree line, looks absolutely prime for a bite or two. The sunlight's been on the woodwork for a good, don't know, hour and a half or so. And in this session, I'm going to hopefully show you a couple of the residents that live in Lake 2, which I'm fishing, and talk you through in depth one of my favourite rigs, which is the Slip D multi-rig. Now, it's the rig that was the feature of the winter ClubCarp box, and it's a rig I've got the utmost confidence in, especially as I'm going to be fishing in amongst structure timber. The key is to trust your tackle, to use something reliable, and hopefully we can extract some of these carp. As I said last night, it was chucking it down, it wasn't very pleasant. Today's a completely different day. We're sort of early spring, so it's absolutely prime time. The stock of Lake 2, I'm not 100% sure, because I've never fished it before. As I've said, I've never even walked it, what the stock is. I know that there's a good average, the bailiff tells me, of between upper doubles and sort of low 20s. There's a few 30-pounders, and there's also one, maybe two at the right time of year, 40-pounders. Lake 2 is, I'm going to say, 3 acres, maybe a little bit less. It's intimate, it's tree lined, and as I've said, there's plenty of cover and fishing options for the angler. What I've chosen to do, as I've got up and the sun's out, is pretty much visually target a little notch that I can see here in the tree line. It's really undercut. It's undercut underneath it, so it's nice and safe. I'm going to fish locked up. I'm going to make sure that I'm on my rod. I'm using that Slip D multi-rig. I've had to make a few rig adjustments to accommodate the rules, which we'll talk about. But essentially, I'm just about to deploy a rig right in the zone. There it is. Ship it back, and hopefully, if they're in there and they play the game, I can show you a Yateley carp in a short period of time. Well, the sun's just poked up, it's hit that margin, I've been watching it, and I've dropped rod in a little alcove, which I thought I saw maybe just a dorsal sort of scoot by, and within, I don't know, an hour or so, big drop back, leads come off, I was straight on the rod, and with a bit of luck, nice common, we can land our first Yateley carp. There we go. Thank you, Yateley. Good to get off the mark, and that was a good scrap in this tight little bay. Chuffed to bits. Come on. There he is, my first Yateley Swan Valley carp. A nice mid-20 common. a real character, a great bite, fishing tight against a little alcove. Scopex squid flake, a little Scopex squid trimmed down wafter hook bait on that all important Slip D multi-rig, and I'm chuffed to say the least to get off the mark. Great scrap, intense battle in this little bay, and just look at him. That is what you come to Swan Valley for. Real character, good account of himself. I'm living the dream. Mwah. Thank you very much, mate. Well, I'm off the mark, and in a second I'm going to show you in a bit more detail the rig that I used and exactly how I went about catching him. Now, my rig of choice for this session, and the rig that was the subject of the winter ClubCarp box, is the Slip D multi-rig. The reason why I use it all year round, it's really versatile, ultra strong, reliable, and primarily it's really quick to change hooks. Now, I'm really fussy about hooks and hook points. I fish on a variety of different venues, whether that be single big carp or big hit style fishing where you're getting lots of bites. And a key element in all of that for me is to have the sharpest hook possible out there working for you. With this rig, you can loop on a new hook, even if the hook point isn't 100%. Instead of just making do and getting it back out there and potentially costing you a fish, you can put a fresh hook straight on in next to no time. Component wise, I'm going to talk you through the original rig that is in the ClubCarp box, and then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the adjustments I've had to make to accommodate the rules here on Swan Valley. Now, to start at the very hook end, if you like, I use or prefer to use, where possible and rules allow, a twister long shank. For me, it's ultra sharp, straight pointed, it's aggressive with that long shank pattern and in-turned eye, so it catches hold really quickly. It's a really positive hook, and it's ultra strong whether you be fishing in snags, whether you be fishing open water. It's not going to let you down, which is really important. Onto that, and the actual how I mount the hook bait is a micro ring swivel. That runs on the Slip D element of the rig, but that again, lots of movement and flexibility in the hook bait itself. On top of that, and just to neaten everything up and keep the D in position, I have a kicker or shrink tube, depending on if I'm using, for example, a bit of PVA, I'll use shrink tube because it's a little bit tighter and keeps that D set if I'm casting with PVA. However, if not, I'm quite happy just to slide a kicker on there. On that section there, which goes along the hook, there's no coating, so it's nice and supple, there's plenty of movement. I generally use it with a wafter hook bait, so that gives the rig at the hook end plenty of movement to turn and catch hold and react when the fish takes. Onto that, I've basically created a figure of 8 loop knot, and where that loop knot ends is where the coating starts, and the actual hook length material is 20 pound stiff skin link. I like the stiffness, it gives you separation from the lead system, but in 20 pound there's still a little bit of movement there to take to any bottom contours that may arise. On the join where that overhand loop knot is, on the hook section, before you get to the coated section, I've just added a sinker or a little bit of Klingon putty. All that does is pin that section down to the deck, and I've got a little blob of putty a little bit further up just before the lead system. On the end, to sort of terminate the rig, I've got an overhand loop knot again, and then an anti-tangle sleeve, and all I do is clip that onto my chosen lead system. And again, with this rig, versatility is key. You can use it on an inline, you can use it on a helicopter system, and you can use it on a leg clip. I generally prefer to use it on a leg clip setup. That's pretty much the rig. In terms of tying it, it's just 2 overhand loop knots. A small one in the coated section at the top for your lead system, a slightly larger 2.5 inch overhand loop knot at the end in the strip section to give you that movement. Then the little micro rig ring or ring swivel at the end just to give the hook bait movement, and the kicker or the shrink tube just to neaten everything up. Now, for this session on Swan Valley, the adjustments I've had to make to accommodate the rules, the main rule being that you're not allowed to use long shank hooks, is I've used a claw hook. I've got a size 5 claw hook, which is a short shank pattern, and all I've done to sort of mimic the long shank twister that I like to use in the original rig that I was talking about is instead of using a kicker, I've used a longer piece of shrink tube, liner style, and what that's done is extended the shank of that hook. So effectively, it acts like a long shank pattern. The rest of the rig is exactly the same, from mounting the hook bait through to the 2 loops and the lengths. All I've done is change that little element to accommodate the rules. As I said before, that's the beauty of the rig. It's very personal to you, depending on what hook pattern you want to use, what rules you might need to accommodate, and what situation you find yourself in. But for me, if I'm fishing wafters or bottom baits to a snag out in open water, that's my go-to rig. Easy to tie, ultra reliable. You can change your hook every time and it won't let you down. Well, what a day that has been. I have chased them round like Usain Bolt without the speed. It's fair to say I got itchy feet in there, having caught one tight against the snags and not really seeing any more fish activity. So what I've done is I've pretty much chased them up the lake with no joy, and now I'm prepping a spot for sort of later on. I've led it out there, and around about 5 wraps, nice and tight, nice and close, there's a real pronounced sort of gravel area. Most of the bottom's quite silty, varying degrees of sort of drops. You get no drop, you get a muffled drop, but that is absolutely machine gun gravel, surrounded by a few strands of weeds, and it's a perfect spot for me to put a bit of bait on for this evening and fish my 3 rods out on that spot. Now, in terms of bait, when I was fishing in the edge baiting pole across to that snag line, I used exactly the same mix I'm using now. So I've got Nash oily hemp, and all I've done is I've soaked some 12mm and 15mm Scopex squid boilies in that oily hemp, just so that they absorb it and they wash out a little bit and they become a bit softer and more palatable. I've then coated that in a glug of Scopex squid spod syrup, and I've added a few, just a smattering of sweet corn, not too much. There are tension here, so I don't want to go crazy on the small bits and bring them into the swim, and that's why I've got no pellet in the mix. On top of that, again, when fishing across those spots, I've been using a lot of Scopex squid flake. That keeps the fish grubbing around in the area, it keeps them concentrated on those spots under the snags, and I've used exactly the same bait mix out on this spot. It is reminiscent of that. All right, there's no snags and it is open water, but it's a small spot of gravel in amongst weed, and I want those little particles as well as a few bigger particles of pure boilie out there. And all I'm doing is I'm introducing probably 10 spoms or so, just a nice little amount just to get started. And then what I will do also, purely to get some bigger food items out there and to sort of get the range, is I've got a bag of just neat 15mm Scopex squid boilies. And what I can use is I can use the dot spot as a target when it's out there and I've deposited some bait, which is that hemp mix, a few whole boilies, some flake, some sweet corn and the Scopex squid liquid. When it's out there, I can leave it on the surface, flip that over, and it's actually 5 wraps for me within sort of throwing distance to be able to put a lovely little spread of boilie away from the main concentration of bait. What that'll do, hopefully, is I know I've said I want the fish on that little spot and that's where I want to put my rigs and get a bite, but it will put some bait in the surrounding weeding area, and hopefully through the course of later on and maybe the evening, the fish will come in, clear that spot up, get a bit of confidence, and hopefully hone in on that little gravel area where we can catch them. That's certainly the theory. Let's get a bit of bait out there and see if we can nick one off that spot later on. There we go, we're all set for the evening. It has been a busy day. I cannot say that I could have done anything else other than try as hard as I did throughout the course of the day to track them down. I've chased them around. Unfortunately, there's a no zig rule on here, so obviously we couldn't deploy zigs. I've tried a little bit, potentially at looking if there's a chance off the surface. Not really. They've been up in the water mooching around, so what I've done, as you saw me earlier, hopefully I put some bait out on a spot, fingers crossed that they drop down through the course of the evening. The free rods are out there, the slip D multi-rigs are on, the hook baits that have got me that bite over in the snaggy swim, which now seems infinitely ages ago, I don't know where the day's gone, it's been a long one, are the same. So hopefully throughout the course of the evening we can manage to pick up a few bites, if not maybe at first light. Either way, I'm feeling positive, fingers crossed I can show you another Swan Valley carp. Classically, just tucked into bed, just about switching off to go to sleep, and the right hander has absolutely melted. I said to the lads when I put the right hander out, there was an absolute granite drop. It felt so good. I heard a few fish crashing sort of beyond the spot, and then this is gone. Feels like a nice fish. Good to be playing one. I haven't got a clue what time it is. I reckon it's around about midnight, 11 o'clock. So there's certainly time for another one on that baited area. Just nice to be playing one. You are mine. Well, thank you for the early wake up. Lovely. And the night is young. Well, there he is, the Yateley alarm clock. Just as I was shutting my eyes, it absolutely tore off. And I've got my second Swan Valley Yateley carp, and it's a mirror. I've had a common and a mirror. This one off that spot, as I said before, on that trusty slip D multi-rig. But it is worth noting that on the take, as I lifted into it, I felt like I may have dragged the middle rod. So what I did is, as per the rules, I've got him in a sling, in the net and unhooked. Before I've lifted him out, while he's resting, I've got those two rigs back out in position. Really good drops on that spot. A scattering of bait just over the top. And fingers crossed, the night is young. We may have a few more, but if not, they could hold off until first light for the next bite and I can get a bit of kip. Either way, I'm buzzing. A great way to wake up. Swan Valley, thank you very much. Mwah. Hello. Well, a long, lean Yateley common to round off my time at Swan Valley Lakes. A bite on first light. Videographers may have been sleeping. Managed to get him in. It's been a really good session. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a brilliant complex. Hopefully I've shown you an insight into that Slip D multi-rig and used it to good effect. Swan Valley, I'll definitely be back, and hopefully I'll see you all again soon.